Hello and welcome to the EnSpirit podcast, where we inspire you to develop and enhance your entrepreneurial talents and skills. This series is packed full of information, tips and interviews that help you change and find the edge in your game. I'm your host, Beju Solanki. I'm a performance psychologist and I've been working with entrepreneurs and business owners for the last 25 years, helping them improve their game. To find out more information about me, please look on all social media platforms, but specifically Clubhouse and Instagram. Before we launch this week's episode, I'd love to tell you about the Change Your Game Scorecard. If you're struggling to achieve what you really want and you're not sure where to start, the Change Your Game Scorecard will help you identify where you need to improve. Life is a game, and there are 3 core games you need to conquer to succeed in life. That's the inner game, your mindset, your emotions, your thoughts. Your game plan, that's your strategy and your roadmap. And then your outer game, how consistent and persistent you are in taking actions. The Change Your Game Scorecard will help you identify how strong you are in each of those games. Please visit changeyourgamescorecard.com for more information and get your report today. Thank you for listening. And welcome to the next EnSpirit podcast. I'm delighted to welcome author, speaker, entrepreneur Bob Burg from New York. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Beju. It's so great to be with you.
Yes, finally. I'm really excited about today's podcast because I'm a fan of your work. I read your book Go Giver a few times, but really recently, a few weeks ago, and it really sort of hit a chord with what's going on in the world and everything. So for people who don't know, you're an author, a speaker, you're a coach. You talk about the entrepreneurial spirit, which is very aligned with what EnSpirit is about. But before we go on to the work of the Go Giver, I would like to just investigate how you got to become a speaker, coach, and author. Where did it all start for you?
I began in broadcasting. I was first in radio doing sports, and then television doing news for a very small ABC network affiliate in the Midwestern United States. You know, Beju, I really wasn't very good at it, and it wasn't something that was going to end up being my life's work. So I like to say I graduated into sales.
Right.
The only challenge was that I knew nothing about sales on any kind of formal level. I had no training or experience, and the company where I started, their training was negligible at best, and so really I was out on my own. So I floundered for the first few months. I mean, I made a lot of calls, knocked on a lot of doors, was on the phone a lot, visiting offices, did all those things, but I didn't know what I was doing. I had what Jim Rohn, the old, if you remember Jim Rohn, the great business philosopher and very successful man, he would have said, I had the motivation, but I didn't have the information.
Right, I get you.
I was very quickly going nowhere. Now, of course, you can have the information, but if you don't have the motivation, that's also not going to be productive. But we need to have both. It's not an either or, it's an and. And so I floundered for a while. One day I was in a bookstore, not really sure what I was looking for, but I came across a section on sales. Now, that does not sound like any big deal now, but 40 years ago, when I started, those kinds of books just weren't as prevalent as they are now. So I was inspired just to see that there were books on selling. I picked up a couple of books. One was by Tom Hopkins, one was by Zig Ziglar, and I took those home. And what I would do is after work, until the early hours of the morning, I would read and study and highlight and take notes and dog-ear the pages and put sticky notes and practice and do all those things. Well, within a few weeks, my sales began to go really well.
Right.
And this was very encouraging because it said to me that if you have a methodology for doing something, you can pretty much accomplish whatever you set your mind to within reason. And so I just started studying and learning and growing and applying. And the neat thing too was understanding that part of understanding selling was not just the how-to aspect, but the personal development aspect. So I started getting all the books that you've probably read and all your listeners have read, the How to Win Friends and Influence People and The Magic of Thinking Big, the Think and Grow Rich and Psycho-Cybernetics and all the great classics. and realizing that success was really an inside job. You build yourself up on the inside, and success manifests itself on the outside. And so eventually I worked my way up to sales manager of another company and started also sharing what was working with me and my sales team with others. And it sort of morphed into a speaking business.
So did you, when you sort of got into the speaking business, in your head, when you were working for someone and building sales, did you always have this drive to do your own thing and be your own boss, if you like, and create an impact in the world?
Yeah, I did. I think I'm entrepreneurial by nature. That's just a part of me. I think the autonomy of knowing that I'm, sort of able to, I won't say control my own fate, because to what degree do we control our own fate? But we certainly are in a position to make the decisions that we make based on, how well we can have a hand in controlling our own fate. And that's important to me. It isn't to everyone. We're all different. But yes, I think that's one aspect of an entrepreneur, whether they're in business for themselves or even working within another company. They have that entrepreneurial spirit about them. They understand that they are there, that their goal is to serve other people. Absolutely. Right? I mean, that's how an entrepreneur, if you own your own business, your end customer is the customer, right? The end customer, the end user. And as an entrepreneur, that's the only way you're going to survive, by providing immense value to your end customer. I often say when I speak at sales conferences that nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet, or because you need the money, or even because you're a nice person. They're going to buy from you because they believe that they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. Well, it's the same when you're an entrepreneur within another company. You'd be an intrapreneur. Yeah. Well, who are your customers? That may or may not be the end users. It may be your supervisor, maybe the team you lead, maybe your fellow coworkers, maybe that person in the next silo who isn't usually very helpful, but because of your people skills and ability to get right, you're able to. It's because again, nobody's going to hire you and pay you a salary because you have a mortgage payment to make.
Right? Yeah, exactly. They don't buy from you to build your business up. They buy from you because they want the thing solved.
Right. And if you work for someone else, you also have to be entrepreneurial, because they're not going to keep you on and pay you because you need the money. It's going to be because you're providing so much value to the organization that it makes it worthwhile to them to keep you on.
One thing I like about your philosophy is about, I started my business 13 years ago, but about 7-8 years ago, I really discovered that entrepreneurship isn't just about business. It's this spirit that we have. And when I discovered the original etymology of the word that comes from the Sanskrit Athena prana, that means self-motivation, that sort of aligned what entrepreneurship really is. Yeah. And you talk about that as well in the same philosophy that I talk about it within EnSpirit.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I love what you do with words. My co-author of the Go-Giver and the Go-Giver series, John David Mann, he is just an amazing wordsmith. So he'll take any word and, like you, he'll go into detail and see its root and where it came from. Well, I love to do that too, but he just does it, and obviously you do, in a way that's superb. But you look at a word like entrepreneur, exactly. It's not about the business; it's about your mindset. It's about how you approach life. It's sort of like when people say, if you look at economics is not about money. Economics is about incentive. It's about what drives people to make certain decisions. That's what economics is. I've heard it said, and I love this: free market capitalism is not about money. Free market capitalism is about freedom and choice. Now, the result, if you approach it correctly, is money and enlarged economy for everyone when it's done correctly. But so many times the thing itself is not what the thing is about. It's the result. We always say that money is an echo of value, right? So if you focus on providing immense value to others, okay, people will then exchange their money for that value. But again, the focus is up to you. It's up to you to place your focus in the right place, and that's on the other person and the value you're providing them. So often what we think a thing is about isn't really what it's about. It's the result of what it's really about.
Exactly. Because people don't want to buy the vehicle. They don't want to buy the the actual physical book, which is the paper or the video series or the speaker. They want what's the thing that's inside that's going to give them the transformation, the insight, the information.
And that's why selling has got to be understood correctly for people to do well at it. Because see, many people think that selling is about trying to convince someone to buy something they don't need or want. Well, that's not selling. That's called being a con artist. Okay.
Yeah.
If they don't want it or need it, why would you try? No, selling is simply discovering what the other person does want, does need, does desire, and helping them to get it. Interesting, the Old English root of the word sell was salan, which meant to give. So when you're selling, you're literally giving. Now, someone might say, well, wait a second, Bob Burg, isn't that just semantics? What are you really giving when you're selling? Well, I suggest, and then let's say you are about to do a presentation for someone of your product or service, what have you, right? You're selling. What exactly are you giving? I suggest you're giving that person time, attention, counsel, education, empathy, and ultimately immense value.
And I think if people understood that one sentence about what selling is, it would make a whole load of, especially in the times we're living in now, business, you generate money for business through selling, but understanding that philosophy and having that little switch to see that selling is all about serving the customer,
right?
You're gonna win more than often.
The focus is on them.
Yeah.
It's gotta be.
I really want to talk about the sort of the go-giver philosophy, but before I go with that, can I just ask you, when you growing your own business and doing your own your services, what were some of the personal challenges and business challenges that you came across that you encountered growing your business?
Well, I think one of mine, and that's such a great question because it's so very important. We know that many people who become entrepreneurs, it's really, and I think who was the person? Michael Gerber, pointed this out first in his E-Myth books, entrepreneurial myth books, that people have a certain skill set and think that qualifies them to be in business, right? Where all it means is they have a skill set.
Yeah.
So to me, one of the challenges I had is I don't really have a natural head for business. Okay, I have certain skill sets and certain things I'm good at and love to do that don't necessarily translate into running a successful business. So I had to understand that and sharpen myself at the places where I needed to be. Sure, there are some things you can delegate to others, but you can't abdicate necessarily, especially when you own your own business. And so, I needed to learn those things that would at least put me in a position where I could focus on what I did best while not discounting my weaknesses and having that catch up to me. And there were times, by the way, that they did in the early days. So I had to learn some tough lessons.
So coming on to the book Go Giver, which was, like I say, it's had a big impact on me. How did you come up with the philosophy around the story? Before we go into the sort of 5 laws, how did you come up to that story? Was it your idea? Was it your co-authors? Combination of both?
So I think it really began before I had gone into business for myself, and I was still in sales at this time, and or sales director. I'm still in sales, but I was still in sales working for another company in sales. And I had gone to work. I had left my first job and gone to work for another company and was selling a high ticket item. And I was really in a sales slump. And you know how frustrating and debilitating that can feel. And I started doing the exact opposite of what I needed to be doing to bring myself out of that slump. I was focusing on me and the sale rather than on the other person. So it was sort of one of those horrible cycles, where the more I focused on myself, the worse I did, the more I focused on myself.
Yeah.
And I remember being back at the office one day after again, not having a sale occur. And I must have had a disgusted look on my face, but one of the older people in the company. He was not he was not in the sales department. I think he was in the engineering department or something. And I didn't know him very well, but he was one of these people who, while he didn't say much, whenever he did say something, it was always very profound.
Right.
And I think he saw me as sort of like Joe, the protagonist in The Go-Giver, you know, a young, ambitious, aggressive, up and coming, worked hard, but was not in any way realizing his potential because of the focus being in the wrong place. And so he was kind enough to say, Berg, he was a last name kind of guy. He said, Berg, can I give you some advice? And I said, yeah, please do. I need it. And he said, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target, he said, is serving others. Now, when you hit the target, you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money, and you can do with that whatever, you know, with that money, whatever you choose. But never forget, he said, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It isn't the target itself. Your target is serving others. And, you know, that's really, Beju, when I came to realize that great salesmanship is never about the salesperson. Great salesmanship is never about your product or service, as important as those are. Great salesmanship is just simply about the other person. It's about bringing, adding, giving immense value to the lives of those you touch. It's about making that person's life better just as a result of having you in it. And so, you know, that became my sales philosophy and made a huge difference. Now, I also kind of had a knack for being able to develop relationships that would lead to direct business and referrals. And once I started as a speaker, after I was about 3 or 4 years into it, I wrote my first book called Endless Referrals. The subtitle was Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. And it was about how people in sales, entrepreneurs, salespeople, professionals could, you know, who had a great product or service, they believed in it, they knew it brought great value to others, but they didn't feel comfortable in the process of developing those relationships that led to new business and referrals. It was a how-to book, right? It was a system on how they could do that. And that was really all about the Go-Giver philosophy. You know, it was about focusing on others, always looking to bring value to others or give value to others. So, but for years I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take the basic philosophy of endless referrals, which is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust, and put that into a parable. So coming up with the Go-Giver title was easy because what do these people do to develop these relationships? They're always giving. They're giving value to others. But really asking John David Mann to co-author and to be the lead writer, because I knew him from when he was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I used to write for. And back then he was only known within a certain niche. Now he's known everywhere and has been the co-author and ghostwriter of numerous bestsellers. But back then few people knew about his brilliance. Fortunately, I was one of them who did. So I asked him to be the co-author and lead writer, and so we collaborated on the story, and that's kind of how that happened.
Fantastic. I want to go on to the 5 laws in a minute, which you talk about the story, and I do encourage anybody who hasn't read The Go-Giver, go make sure you go look out for the book after you finish listening to this podcast. I want to go back to when this engineer said to you, make it about don't make it about the money, make it about sell. Was your instinct, did you initially thought, yeah, that makes sense, or did you resist? No, I'm sure that didn't make
What was your great question? You know, you're the first person, I've done probably thousands of interviews. You know, you're the first person who ever asked me that question. What a great question that is. Did I resist it at first? I genuinely do not remember if I did. I suspect I was probably open to it because I was doing so badly, you know, in that slump, that I knew something had to change. And sometimes, and by the way, one of my dear friends and a mentor of mine, her name is Dondi Scumaci. She's an amazing mentor, leadership speaker, influencer, just fantastic. We've talked about, you know, these kind of, we call them drive-by mentors. And we call them that because we may not know the person well, may not have any kind of significant relationship with them. Maybe we never see them again, okay? but they happened to say something to us that we were open at the very time they said it, right? That they just happened to be there and drive by, right? And have that great piece of advice that we were ready for. And I think that's what happened.
I think that's really key, ready for it. Because the reason I ask this is it's very easy to say, yeah, you're exposed to stuff, whether it's Think and Grow Rich, Influence People, all these sort of concepts and ideas. However, if the person is not in a certain place, it's like a lead wall, it's a brick wall. So I was really interested, you were probably in this sales mode, I'm not making money, I'm not this, I'm not good, I'm not this, I'm not that. And then this engineer who's not in sales gives you a bit of advice and you think, well, who are you to tell me? Right? What do you know? But it landed for you and you thought, oh, okay. So
and that's a great point. Have you ever had a situation too where you knew of someone who maybe, and I know this has happened with me personally, that you may have read a book and it just didn't relate the first time, and 3 years later you read it and it's like, this is genius. The book didn't change. You changed. I changed.
Yeah.
We were now ready to accept this wisdom. And so, I think that has a lot to do with it. And I was just ready, I think, at the time. And again, I don't remember what my thought even was. I just remember it made a profound difference. I must have accepted it certainly on a certain level because that made a big difference for me. But it's so interesting when you think about that.
And then part of the reason I have your book as part of my reading list for my clients is, like I said, we'll read this first and then I'll explain my philosophy, because I do some sales training, I do entrepreneurial training, then I'll explain why this is so relevant to where you're at, irrespective of what you're selling. And they start to realize, it's not about the money. It's not about the money. So for those who've not read your book yet, you've got five laws that you talk about that impact on personal effectiveness and also professional success. Briefly, what are those 5 laws?
So the laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. The law of value is all about making the buying experience, or and that starts even before they buy, but making the entire relationship experience and buying experience so phenomenal that person feels as though they received a lot more in value than what they paid for, while of course you make a very healthy profit. Law number 2, the law of compensation, says that your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So where law number 1 is all about the focus on the immense value you're giving another person through what you do, okay? Law number 2 says that, law number 1's great, but that's just your potential income. Law number 2 is about how many lives you impact with that immense value. That's why referrals and introductions are so key and so important, because it allows you to reach out and be able to impact and touch the lives of so many more people. Law number 3, the law of influence, says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Now, not in a self-sacrificial way. We're not talking about being a martyr. We're simply saying, as Joe, the protagonist in the story, the protege, learned from several of the mentors, and as we talked about, we touched on earlier, the golden rule of business, of sales, is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. Well, there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you from others than by genuinely moving from an I focus or me focus to an other focus. Looking for ways, as Sam, one of the mentors in the story, advised Joe, looking for ways to make your win all about the other person's win. Law number 4, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go on, carry on.
Law number 4, the law of authenticity, says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. In this part of the story, one of the mentors, Deborah, shared that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are all very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true authentic core. But when you do, When you show up as yourself day after day, week after week, month after month, well, people feel good about you. They feel comfortable with you. They feel safe with you, and for good reason. They know who they're getting. They know who they're getting. And now they do like you. They love you. They trust you. They want to be in a relationship with you. They want to tell others about you. So it's important, in order to operate from an authentic base, we need to be able to understand and embrace our strengths. That way we're able to come from the truth, because let's face it, it's hard to show up authentically when you don't feel you have anything worthy of showing up authentically for. And coaches such as you and people like yourself who are able to help us really kind of understand what those strengths are. And of course, we need to understand our weaknesses too. Some we can ignore, some we need to mitigate, some we need to turn into strengths, right? If we're going to be, so wisdom is kind of understanding which are which. And then law number 5, the law of receptivity, simply says that the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. And this really means, nothing more, Beju, than understanding that we breathe out and we have to breathe in if we're going to sustain our lives as well as thrive in our lives. It's not one or the other. We breathe out carbon dioxide, we breathe in oxygen. We breathe out, which is giving, we breathe in, which is receiving. Now, despite the horribly negative messages we receive from the world around us regarding money and prosperity and business and abundance, and we receive horrible, really incorrect messages from the world around us about that. Despite that, okay, what we need to realize is that giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. Giving and receiving are simply two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem, okay? It's not, are you a giver or a receiver? No, you're a giver and a receiver. But you also understand that the way life works is the giving comes first. We must focus on giving or providing value to others, value to the marketplace, and then allow ourselves to receive.
And it makes sense whereby if there's not a receiver, the giving just gets reflected back.
Exactly.
The energy of the world doesn't rise, because then you're constantly saying, where do I give this? Whether it's value, information, love, sincerity. Where if I'm giving it and it's coming back to me, the giver gets exhausted. So it's like the receiver needs to be open to, wow. So when that engineer said to you what he said to you, you were a receiving mode.
Yeah, it's the reward. It's the reward for, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, we're living in this time of this pandemic and COVID, which is, so many people are very in a mindset of feeling they're getting small and they're getting scarcity. I need to look after myself. What do you think the sort of 5 laws you talked about what's the lessons within that people now who feel scared, who feel like they're not in control of their destiny, can take from that philosophy to help them feel better about themselves and get more out of life?
Sure. And let's face it, what we've had to go through with this pandemic is horrible. I think successful people live in truths. They don't deny the truth. They don't whitewash it and put their head in the sand and say, oh, it's not there. No. I think we have to deal with what we have to understand what is. And it doesn't mean we have to enjoy it. We just have to accept it and understand it and acknowledge it. And we, ask ourselves, okay, what is it that I cannot control? Because there are certain things within this pandemic we cannot control. What can we not control? We acknowledge it, but we don't focus on it. We ask ourselves, what can I control? What can I control? What actions can I take that will bring value to others? Okay. And that's what we need to do. There are no magical or mystical answers to that. It all depends upon what you do and where you're able to do that. But the toughest thing can be taking our focus off of ourselves during a time like this, because let's face it, we're human beings. And, a pandemic is certainly going to cause that kind of, but we need to, and that's why, again, we need to understand it. and accept that it's a thing. Now, we don't have to be ruled by that, though. We don't have to be controlled by that. So I think really what we need to do is ask, what can I control? Okay. What actions can I take? What attitude can I have? And then, we proceed accordingly.
When you look at your own journey through your corporate life, learning sales, becoming an author speaker, what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I think that I've been able to bring value to others in a way that's touched some lives and helped make them more effective. And that's just, I think that's just the byproduct of the job I've been able to, to work with, that I get to see some of these results because you get feedback and you get emails and you see people at a conference who gives you that. Now, but anything we do, the person who works in the bookkeeping department of a widget manufacturing company who may never see the end user using and benefiting from that product, of course, they made a huge difference in someone's life as well. They just don't get to see it because it was their bookkeeping skills that kept the books on balance, that allowed their employer to stay in business, that allowed them to pay their salespeople and manufacturers, that allowed them to set up the distribution, you know what I'm saying? So, so with me being an author, being a speaker and so forth, I've been able to have the pleasure and honor of having feedback to how my work has made a difference. But that's just fortunate on my part that I've been able to do that. But to be able to hear that. But I think it's important for all of us to kind of ask ourselves, based on what I do, how does it ultimately touch someone's life? Because it does.
You talk about focus on the controllables, especially in the world that we're living in now. A lot of people are going to be confronted with changes they didn't expect in their lives and feel that I've got to look after myself. And we talk about the entrepreneurial spirit and the entrepreneurial mindset. What for you are some of the key attributes of thinking entrepreneurially that someone who may not have even considered that way of thinking because they've been in a corporate environment may have to start thinking like? What sort of ways of thinking do you think they need to start to adopt or be open to?
Well, I mean, I think you said it just in what you said. They need to adopt the idea that they have got to now start asking themselves a different question. And that question moved from how many hours do I need to put on to get a paycheck to how do I find a way to bring value to the marketplace, to bring value to others. It's not necessarily a question that you ask yourself and then answer immediately. I think it takes introspection. That's why we need to talk to people like yourselves who can counsel us on that. It's why we need to listen to conversations. It's why we need to, watch the TED Talks and read the books and listen and discuss with other people and, I throw ideas off of others, whom you have a trusting relationship and figure out, I remember Randy Gage, one of my favorite speakers and authors on prosperity, and him saying, you don't have a money problem, you have an idea problem. And what he really means by that, and that's not to disparage someone who has a money, of course, if there's a money problem, there's not, but what he means is if you can find a way to use your ideas in order to, again, look at how to create value for others, your money challenges will disappear. It kind of goes back to what you and I were talking about earlier. Often the thing itself is not really the thing itself. So it's not necessarily the lack of money, it's the lack of finding ways to bring value to the marketplace that will result in that money.
One of the things that social media has given us is the ability to be in front of anyone. If it wasn't for social media, we wouldn't be doing this podcast now. So it has tremendous value.
It does.
There's two things that social media give people: the opportunity to gain someone's attention,
right?
But to keep that attention, you need to create influence. What would you say to people who feel, right, I need to be more influential so I can give more value in the world? What kind of things, how should they approach being influential? Because sometimes they confuse that with being manipulative. It's not about that.
All right. So, let's first talk, let's look at social media and the various platforms there are. That, as you said, it gives us the opportunity to meet people, you and I meeting each other, who knows if you and I would have ever had the opportunity to meet without this particular platform. We might have, but we might not have. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we know that social media and the internet gives us the opportunity to establish and create relationships with people like never before. But then the next step is, well, now it's creating that know, like, and trust relationship. And people, when the internet first sort of really became a thing that or social media, I should say, that people said, well, can you really cultivate relationships, deep relationships, without being face to face? Absolutely, you can. Absolutely, you can. Back years ago, when I was, started in sales, not sales when I first started, but when I started my own business, okay, and started selling my own business. I was my salesperson, I was my manager, I was my take out the trash person, I was my right.
Everything.
I mean, I cultivated relationships with people all over the country, using this technology, and this is 40 years ago, using this really strange piece of technology. It was called the telephone. And and I created wonderful, deep relationships with people, and that's how I built my business. So yeah, whatever the medium, that's just the medium. We always have to ask ourselves the question, is what I'm about to say, or what I'm about to tweet or pin or post or respond or whatever, is it likely to add value to that other person? That's the question.
Yeah.
Right.
And I also say to people that sometimes you don't know when you've added value, because no one's gonna, someone who doesn't like the comment or make a comment, they're watching you, and you probably change someone's life, and you will never ever know it.
Absolutely. Often it's the way, and just picking up on what you said, there could be a conversation going on and about something, and someone says something in a disagreeable way, but you come back in and you're very kind and tactful, making your point, and nobody says anything, but there are 100 people lurking and watching, and they're seeing that you came up with not just a rational, logical, but a very polite and a respectful answer. Now they're keeping their eye on you, because you're the type of person who they see, they right. And so so we don't even know sometimes with the influence. So
we don't. And I often say to our clients that it's your duty to keep showing up, because you don't know you don't know when someone's ready. Because I have this philosophy called NATO, which is not attached to outcome, and I say if you are attaching what you do based on whether someone's reacted or said something, or bought something, you're not. You need to show up at your best and give value, and the market, your audience, the people who need to have your thing will approach you when they're ready.
Yeah, there's a wonderful book that was written in 1910 by Wallace D. Wattles called The Science of Getting Rich. And one of his main themes was constantly and continually providing value to others in everything you do. And that when you do this, and I'm going to pick up on what you said, when you do it without attachment to the results. That doesn't mean you don't expect good things to eventually happen, or they may now, they may a year from now, they may never, whatever. But when you are constantly looking for how you can bring value to any situation, any person, any circumstance, okay, just focus on the value without the attachment to the results. That's when the momentum builds, and the momentum builds. And again, it doesn't have to take a long time. Or it might. We don't know. We can't control the outcome.
We don't.
But we can control the value we provide at every single touch point.
Because the universal law says it will come back to you. It might not come back to you in the format you expect, but it will come back to you in some way. So
and by the way, there's nothing magical or mystical about this. It doesn't take a whole lot of faith to that, because we see it all the time. And it makes sense. Why? Because when you're a person providing value to others, people see you as being of value. I mean, that's just how it is. It's actually very logical, very rational.
Absolutely. Bob, listen, I've loved this conversation. I think we probably need a part 2 sometime near the future.
Oh, I'd love it. Thank you.
But before we finish, I just want to ask you a last question. We're in this pandemic and COVID period. From a positive opportunity point of view, what do you see the world of business looking like over the next few years, especially when we come out of the pandemic and COVID, and people talk about the new norm, but just there's a different mindset now of people.
Sure. Well, certainly without without knowing what's going to happen, like anybody, I don't know for sure. But I do think there's one thing, and that is we have become more flexible. Okay. Look at how many Zoom conferences there are now that there weren't before, and how many people said, nah, you can really never conduct business on Zoom. Well, we found out, yes, you can when you need to.
Yeah.
And so I think that people are pretty good when it comes to, it's not that we necessarily as human beings like change, but at a certain point, we know we have to change and make adjustments. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to find that the marketplace, because it's always the marketplace, it's always the entrepreneurs who come up with the ideas, okay? The entrepreneurial spirit is going to adjust and adapt and is going to come up with more ways for us to do more things that right now we may not even be able to imagine.
Absolutely. And I think that it's so, it's not being, the uncertainty, knowing there's uncertainty should be okay for people, because no one knows what the world is going to look like, not even in 6 months' time. If someone said 12 months ago, this is what we experience, no one would believe you. It's a bit like a sci-fi movie. Bob, thank you so much for your time. It really, I think we're going to have a part 2 sometime in the very near future.
I look forward to it. Thank you. I love the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Bob. Before we finish, if people want to know more about you, get hold of you, how can they do that?
The best way is just to go to my website, which is Burg, BURG.com. There's information on my books. There's my blog and all the good stuff. And you can connect with me also at the very bottom. It has all the places I'm on social media. So feel welcome to connect with me there as well.
Fantastic. And I do encourage everybody, go onto Amazon or wherever, Google Go Giver, Bob Burg, and you'll find the book. It's
and they can get a chapter 1 of any of my books if they go to the website and scroll down. So they can go right to burg.com and actually read the first chapters and see if they like where the books are headed, and click through if they'd like.
And all those links will be connected to this podcast. Bob, thank you again very much. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you giving the value to the EnSpirit audience, and I wish you well in the future.
Thank you, Beju. You too.
Thank you for listening. To find out more about myself or the Change Your Game Scorecard, you can visit changeyourgamescorecard.com, where you can find out how strong your game is and get a full detailed report. Also, if you found this episode useful, please do leave a rating or a review in iTunes to help others discover it too. Until the next time, my name is Beju Slanky.